Amiga, do you ever feel caught between two worlds? You cherish your cultural background, but sometimes it clashes with the realities of raising a family in modern America. You might feel pressured to fulfill traditional expectations, yet you crave a life that allows you to be your true, authentic self. If you're a Latina mom nodding your head right now, I see you and I get it. Balanced Motherhood is more than your average mommy coaching program. It's a supportive comunidad designed specifically for you. I understand the unique challenges you face navigating between generations and culturas while forging your own path as a mama. Stop feeling like you have to choose between your roots and your future. Balanced Motherhood empowers you to create a life that celebrates your heritage, embraces your motherhood journey, and prioritizes your own happiness. Spots are limited. Don't miss out on this opportunity to connect with a supportive community and create a more balanced life. Visit the link in the show notes to join the waitlist for the next Balanced Motherhood cohort. I can't wait to meet you. Hola, hola, amiga. Welcome to today's episode where I am so excited that we are finally touching on the topic about financial literacy. I have been wanting to do an episode about this because it is so important to talk about dinero with our loved ones, especially our kids. Our guest today is the remarkably accomplished Jasmine Lopez, a wife, mother of three, and creative entrepreneur with over 2 decades of professional experience. Jasmine Lopez is a Latina creative, owner of Mentally Mutual, and co-founder, executive director of a creative arts nonprofit called The Firehouse Dream. Jasmine authentically shares her story with how she went from bankruptcy to living intentionally and purposefully. She believes when we have a healthy relationship with self, the world, and money, we can have a thriving life that is built out of what brings us joy and meaning. In this episode, we explore Jasmine's perspective on financial trauma, healing, and importantly, raising financially aware kids. She shares great tips about why it's important to share financially aware kids and how to talk to them about money as well. We will also hear Jasmine's personal money journey from experiencing significant loss to redefining success and discovering abundant living. So tune in as we unravel key insights on financial literacy, mindset, and generational wealth, because it is so important that we create positive conversations and that way we can become positive role models to our kids. At the end of the day, we want to make sure that we are setting up for success so that way we can better our future generations and not repeat the cycle of financial trauma, scarcity mindset, as well as having an unhealthy relationship with money. So there was so much that we unpacked in this conversation, and I hope that you enjoyed it as much as I did. So no te lo pierdas as you listen to Jasmine Lopez's story and how we can raise financially aware kids. Welcome to the Viva la Mami podcast. I am your host, Jessica Cuevas. I am a mother of 2 on a mission to help redefine the meaning of motherhood as a modern Latina mom. Motherhood can be a complex journey, interwoven in 2 identities that often make us feel ni de aquí ni de allá. Viva la Mami is committed to providing you with knowledge, tools, and support to navigate the challenges and triumphs of motherhood as Latina moms. On the show, we'll be discussing culturally relevant topics that will help inform and empower you in whichever season you are in on your motherhood journey. We'll be joined by Latina moms, experts and professionals who can offer advice, practical tips, relatable stories, and honest conversations. So bring your cafecito as I invite you to be a part of this space as we create comunidad about the exciting and challenging parts of being a mommy. Ahora, vámonos. Hola, hola, Jasmine. How are you?
I'm so good. How are you?
I am good. Thank you for being here. I love the kind of conversation that we're going to have today because it is so crucial as it relates to raising kids to be financially aware. And that way we can kind of dismantle the financial trauma that some of us grew up with, and also for them to have this positive mindset where oftentimes we didn't really know about. So much that we're going to cover here, but I would love for you to introduce yourself to our listeners. So, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you currently do?
I am Jasmine Lopez. I'm a wife to my husband, married him 17 years ago. We have three beautiful children, ages 15, 11, and 8. And on the entrepreneurship side, I've done it all. I'm a creative entrepreneur, I'm a professional photographer, gosh, for 20 years now. And I really have walked through this journey of how do I build a business that's authentic to who I am and that is connected to the wholeness of who I am, including being a Latina, right? And so it inspired me to start a nonprofit called the Firehouse Dream in Maywood, Illinois. And we exist to be a safe space for BIPOC youth between the ages of 15 and 22 so that they can thrive in every area of their lives. And we do that through creative entrepreneurship, financial wellness, and mental well-being. And then recently just launched my own personal finance business called Mentally Mutual, just reimagining business. Now that I've been on the for-profit side, the nonprofit side, both sides have their own set of challenges. And so Mentally Mutual is this new way of me trying to identify how to do business in a way that centers people and community over profit, that really is leaning more into like the restorative economy, and that really centers collective flourishing and not just our own pockets.
Yes. Oh my gosh, this is amazing. And how did that really inspire you to create that? I know that you mentioned through your experience as a business owner, both the for profit and non for profit side, but what kind of need did you see and gaps did you witness that ultimately led you to this new venture?
Yeah, so well, I lost my home, my car, and my possessions in 2010 in my mid 20s as a young mom and a new wife. And it was through that process where I really believe it was an opportunity to reimagine and redefine what success looked like. And so ever since then, I've been on this journey of rebuilding, really identifying what does success and thriving look like that doesn't tie my worth or my value to money or how much I have and don't have, but rather live an abundant life that's connected to the things that bring us joy and that's connected to the things that reflect our values. I didn't realize that other people were interested in personal finance and my unique way of approaching our finances and how we budget, values based budgeting, and really thinking about a collective wealth building, not just individual wealth building. And so I've really taken the time now to intentionally develop and grow this new venture with Mentally Mutual that centers community. That's really about how do we build generational wealth without it having adverse effects towards impacting our communities, because oftentimes a lot of these strategies deeply impacts our communities. And I live in a community that has experienced disinvestment, so I live it, I see it every day, right? I see how these strategies of buying and holding properties until gentrification happens causes communities like mine to not experience revitalization. And so as I'm identifying what do I want wealth building to look like? How can I do that in a way that honors my community, my neighbors, while me leaving a legacy behind for my children as well?
Oh my gosh, all of this is so beautiful. And it definitely gives perspective, especially as someone who recently, my husband and I purchased an investment property in an area that is slightly being gentrified. And I'm like, you know what? Why don't we be intentional of the individuals that want to stay in the community that they've been for so long instead of, trying to target another population that they can benefit. And yeah, so it definitely gives perspective about, okay, now that we are in this position of power, because it is when you really think about it as business owners, as investors, okay, how can we be intentional to give back in some way? And so I love the platform that you have created, and I see it growing and I love it. And so you did mention that in 2010 you lost a lot of your assets. And so Can you tell us a little bit more about your money story and how was your upbringing about money? And what really inspired you to be a content creator centered on financial literacy?
Yeah, good question. So, as a little girl, little Jasmine grew up in a single parent Latino home on the southwest side of Chicago. And growing up, we faced financial insecurity. Often, was told we didn't have money for things. Saw the ways that my mom tried to really provide, and did an amazing job at trying to provide that security while really not realizing or seeing the ways that we were living is maybe not how many other of my peers were living. And so the concept of curiosity around finances is something I was always interested in, even as a young kid, but that safety was not fostered in my home environment. And so I have a core memory of asking her a question about money and her just giving me this like Latina death stare, like, don't you dare ask me another question around money. And that to me wrote the story that I can't ask questions about money. And so I've been on that journey ever since a little girl through most of my adulthood, trying to learn on my own things that I feel like I should have known but didn't know, like how to budget, how to save, what does investing look like, all of these things, right? And so I'm just like growing up now, a young family, married, and we're trying to pursue this American dream, air quote, right? And realizing that we did it in a way that was beyond our means. And then the mortgage crisis happens in 2010. And we were one of the millions impacted by that who lost our homes, who were displaced. We did not have anywhere to go. And gratefully, my mother in law took us in as we were in transition. We ended up having to borrow some money from a really good friend, which was very vulnerable, right? Because even as like Latinos, we don't talk about money struggles. We don't invite other people into that. And I'll never forget me going to my husband and saying, I think we need to invite our friends into what we're going through. And I think we need to walk through this deep loss and grief in partnership with community. And he was a little nervous at first about it, but we did it. And I'm so grateful because this group of friends really helped us in this transition of loss and grief and trying to really rebuild and trying to do it in a way that, I thought that I thought a lot of my mindsets were it's because I don't know how to budget. It's because I don't know how to save, right? So the first chunk of the years was all about, okay, I need to budget, I need to save, I need to do all these things. And then about 7 years ago is when I was like, okay, I've mastered budgeting and still I have no savings. What am I doing wrong? There's a disconnect here between our physical finances and not achieving the financial goals we're looking for. And that's when I realized there was an opportunity to really address my mindset. What are the money beliefs? What's the money story that I have? The lies that I'm believing about my relationship with money? And how do I heal that so that I can make informed financial decisions for the now and my future? And so that's when my healing journey started. I got into therapy. I connected with a financial coach and began this journey of reading books, learning everything that I can about money, and kind of just walked myself through, okay, these are the lies I'm believing about myself, about what is potentially possible or not possible for me. I realized I had a lot of limitations over myself. And I'll never forget this one time. I connected with my financial coach and she asked me, why did you move to Maywood? And I said, because it's all we could afford. It's all our budget could get us, right? We're such a low income family that at that time that's all we could afford. And she's like, well, that's limited thinking. And I was like,
Mm.
what? I wasn't offended. It was a bold thing to say, but I
Mhm.
feel like something shifted off of me when she said those words. And I got curious again. It was almost that curiosity in me
Mm.
came back and was like, well, what do you mean by that? Tell me
Mm.
more. And she's like, read these books, find some, here are some podcasts, some resources that I think you could get connected with. And I said, okay. And that's when I started. And then I started just Googling more financial books that I could read. And that's what I did. And it got me on this whole process of being like, whoa, she's right. I did have limited
Mm.
thinking. And now I
Yeah.
want to tap into unlimited thinking, unlimited dreaming around what could be for my future, for myself, my family, and for my community.
Mm. Oh my gosh, so much that you shared that I kind of want to unpack a little bit. And I
Yes,
find it
yes.
yeah, I find it so interesting how a lot of folks in the Latinx community are very hesitant to talk about money. And that is just something that you do not talk about at the table. It's almost like politics and religion. For some reason, for our community, it's like, don't even mention how much we make, don't even mention nothing about like our spending habits or anything like that. And for me, I'm like, well, why not? And I think that it always sparks that curiosity that you mentioned, and and bravery as well, to be uncomfortable. And it's like, no, I think we all need to talk about the truth, right? About certain habits that can be damaging, not just in your present life, but also in your future. And how can we kind of tackle that to make sure that you live a life that you want, that we shouldn't limit ourselves? And I am speaking out of privilege, I would say, because I am, you know, second generation for the most part in this country, right? I didn't have to go through that struggle of immigrating from one country to the other, of assimilating. And oftentimes maybe money is kind of at the back burner because you're just trying to survive when it comes to like saving or investing, or trying to build a business or what have you. And so I definitely speak from privilege in that way. But now that we're here, right, how can we make a better impact for our children, for the next generation? And so that in itself is such a big topic, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to invite you, because through what you've learned in your experience and how much you've grown in educating yourself, right? And seeking help, especially in getting a financial coach, I think that is so helpful. But I'm kind of curious, like, did you spend a lot of money in hiring them? Because that oftentimes is a hesitation, right? We have this limited mindset where it's like, well, I'm not going to pay for someone to tell me how to budget, you know? Can you tell us a little bit more about like any tips that you may want to share about that specifically, and any based on your research, right? Like, what kind of books do you recommend, or literature that people can start out with if they want to kind of change their mindset?
Yeah, it's in terms of financial coach, everybody has a different approach to how they coach, what that looks like. For my situation, it's what I call creative provision. I actually didn't pay for her service. I only met with her twice. That's all I needed. She's like I kid you not, her saying I had limited thinking was enough of the scales, I guess, off my brain that I needed, that allowed me to be like, okay, curiosity just flooded in, and I did my own research and studied and read books and resources. So one of the first books that she recommended was Rich Dad Poor Dad. It's a great resource. Any book I'm going to label or share are going to have problematic issues in it, right? I always say take nuggets, find nuggets that you resonate with in that book or resource, and apply that part to your life. So I'm going to preface that first because I know he can be somewhat problematic. But there was something in that book again that helped shifted my mindset when he says, instead of saying I can't afford that, ask how can I afford that? Because when we allow ourselves to ask it in a question, it opens up the opportunity for our brain to get creative to figuring out a solution, right? Now, I'm not advocating for spending beyond our means, but could there be opportunity to experience purchasing XYZ that maybe doesn't necessarily require it coming out of our bank account? And that's what I call creative provision. And so, an example of that would be through bartering. Do you have a skill that you can barter in exchange for a financial coach, right? Can
Mm.
you time bank? Going back into like the kind of indigenous ways of how we practice and share shared skills and sharing of resources. That's kind of what I tap into a lot when I'm looking to have access to something like quote unquote financial coaching that maybe isn't in my budget. How can I leverage a skill I have that can allow for me to be able to have access to this opportunity without it coming out of my bank account?
Mm.
So that's a resource. If again, it really depends on like what approach you're looking to do, right? A really great book that I recently read was called Decolonizing Wealth. So if you're really looking to get into like the philanthropy side of things or investments and how you can approach decolonizing our mindsets around wealth, I highly recommend that book. And those are the few that I've listened to. I've listened to different podcasts. I listen and follow to a lot of financial coaches, content creators who do finances. Now, my approach isn't technically around like how to get rich. That's not what my content is. So, really finding content creators who have a shared alignment towards like what my intentionality and goals are and what it looks like to build wealth through this reframed viewpoint has been really neat and fun to do personally. But yeah, that's what I would say. I've listened to podcasts, find content creators, and then there are tons of books out there. Like another one that I read by Rachel Rogers is "Everyone Should Be a Millionaire." Again, take nuggets from what you resonate with, and then apply that to your own life.
Mm, yes. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think it's a really good way to start out, and I think it sparks curiosity at first, and knowing that these books exist for a reason, right? And yeah, I totally agree with, like, I think it's Rich Dad Poor Dad. Like, I don't like the way it's written. I'm like, oh, second grader probably wrote it. But this is me being critical on on the literacy standpoint. But my husband is obsessed with that book, and I'm like, you know what, you can just summarize it for me, and that's how we agreed. But I also have read Susie Orman's, and I'm like, okay, this can be a little controversial at times because, again, she's speaking out of privilege, but there were really good tips, and it was very targeted on women and finance. So yeah, and I love how you shared about getting a little bit of this, a little bit of that, because I think at the end of the day, it just depends on what your goals are and what you want to do out of the education that you gain from all of this information. So thank you for
Yeah,
sharing that. Yeah.
for sure. And a lot of these books are available for free and like through
Mm.
library rentals. So you don't even have to go and spend money. There are so many free resources. YouTube is amazing. It's another space to like learn from. Again, I just take nuggets. If there's like a financial strategy I don't know much about, I just Google it. So like velocity baking, for example, is something new that I recently learned about. I
Mm.
popped it in YouTube to watch three different videos on it. And I was like, oh, the light bulb went off. I was like, "Oh, okay, I get the strategy. Could it apply and work for me? Not in this season, but maybe in the future it can." So that's what I mean by like you can find all these free resources and then just taking the nuggets and applying them to what's unique to you. But I think the first key thing that's so important is working through your money mindset and really helping you ourselves to walk through that journey and begin our healing process around what our thoughts and belief systems are specifically around money.
Yes. Yes. And we'll definitely cover that piece because that is so essential. But in the aspect of parenting, because this podcast is for mamas, why do you think it's important to raise financially aware kids?
Yeah, so research says that by the age of 7, our thought patterns and belief systems are set in place. So, as mamas, we have the honor and the privilege of helping mold our children and helping them grow up into fully thriving, abundant individuals. So, what does it look like to partner with them well? Under the umbrella or concept of finances. And so that's why I think it's so important as parents that we not only walk ourselves through a healing journey in partnership with professionals and on our own, but also help walk our kids through the things we're learning so that they can start learning how to connect with their inner child and start to heal and start to really build healthy mindsets and thought patterns around themselves, the world, and money. So I talk about a lot. I believe that in order to have a thriving life, we have to have a healthy relationship with self, the world, and money. And so, how do we do that? What does that look like? And so, having a lot of curiosity with our children and allowing them to ask questions about money is super important to me in how I'm choosing to raise my girls right now.
Yes, yes. Oh, that is awesome. And like you mentioned that beginning at 7 years, that's when really it can make an impact in the way that you perceive things or in the way, you may think about money. And so can you tell us a little bit more about age appropriate ways to talk to kids about money? And I guess I'm speaking more so for me, I have little ones, right? I have a 3 year old and a 6 month old. And so, how does that look like when you approach or talk about money to little kids to ensure that they feel comfortable about it? And then you have those like heavy conversations about money.
Yeah, so I think a practical, tangible way that we practice this now, my kids are a little bit older,
Mm.
but we did do this when they were younger too. We actually got them debit cards. So anytime we actually, if we go on family vacations or let's say Disney, we'll put 20, $30 on their debit card. And it is an invitation for them to learn how to identify what do I want to buy myself with this 20, $30? And am I going to want to just buy everything? Or am I going to want to like be a little bit more intentional about it? Right. So we gave them ownership over stewarding this 20, $30. So that's been something that's been really neat to see. Another thing that I do with my kiddos is when they ask for something, I don't use language like, oh, we can't afford that. We can't do that. Like, I don't do that. I'll say, it's not in our budget right now. Our budget resets at the beginning of the month. Let me see if it's something that we can account for, or add in. And so it allows for us to not shut it down, but for again, an invitation to say, hey, like I hear this desire and what it is you're looking to have access to. But if it's really truly limited right now, where I don't have the resources to provide that for you, let's identify how we can do that in the next month through the when our budget resets. So it's another
Mm.
thing we do. And then we're just very intentional about our language, around money when we talk to our kids. I'll be honest, one of my kids asked me, Mommy, are we poor? And and so again, that curiosity of being like, well, what does poor mean to you?
Mm.
How well, because I don't understand the context of which they're coming through and asking that question, right? So instead of
Right.
being like, how can you ask that or how dare you? It's more that curiosity of saying, well, tell me more about that. What does that
Mhm.
mean to you? Let's talk about that. Well, actually, we believe and value being in relationship with all kinds of families. And that means some families may have a lot of money and their houses could look more fancier than what we have. And then we may even have some friends whose houses look different than ours. But that
Mhm.
doesn't mean one is better than the other. It means that we value the humanity and the dignity of each person, right? So the
Mhm.
same thing with unhoused people. When we see someone on the street who's unhoused, again, we don't put identifying language over that individual. We don't call them homeless people. We call it they are people experiencing homelessness, or they're currently unhoused. That does not devalue them or take away their worth. So we
Mhm.
acknowledge them, we look them in their eyes, we see what resources we have available in our car to be able to give, if it's money or water or food. That's something that we do. I think those are just practical, tangible ways of how we can be able to partner with our children to be able to start associating our actions and our thought patterns and our belief system and how we are engaging with the world through money.
Mm. This is so powerful and I love it. I think it's just about how to bring up money in a way that isn't negative, right? The same thing goes with food, right? How we were force fed and we ultimately had a negative relationship with food. And that's how I kind of see it with money. For some reason, even though it was never talked to us, talked about, like we never talked about money, I think that being that we didn't talk about it, it almost made us, I guess, strangers to money. And then when we had to come in like difficult situations, like for example, student debt, right? Accepting a loan when you are only 17, 18 years old, like that's when we had to confront with money and then we saw it as a negative way. I don't know if you have anything to say about that, but it just makes it very interesting that depending on how your family approaches certain issues or, things that are essentially part of our lives that are a necessity, like food and money, it can make such a big impact for the rest of our lives.
Yeah, absolutely. I resonate with so much of what you just said. And I think it's so important that when we're walking through what it looks like to raise financially aware children, it should definitely be through a shame free approach. It should not be from a shamed place. And that doesn't mean we have to be perfect all the time, right? Like
Mhm.
if we're walking through a hard financial season and we're triggered by a situation, like it's all about how we restore and repair that situation, right? If we experience that with our children. But there's something that you said that I think is really interesting. I think oftentimes we think communication is only through what was verbally said to us, but there are so many forms of communication. So even if there wasn't that verbal exchange from a parent to a child about money, what are the messages that children see and are experiencing in different contexts, whether it's in spaces that we're going to, right? So, an example of that would be my kids go to a private school because the school that they go to has a commitment to racial, ethnic, and class diversity. So, based on how they do their tuition, allows our family to have access to private education.
Mhm.
Something I never thought we would be able to do. But for a season, the school was in a more affluent community. So, my children one day said, "When will our community look like?" Our school, the community our school is in.
Mhm.
When will our community be happy like this community? Right?
Mhm.
So again, tell me more about that. What do you mean by that? What's the messaging you're seeing, right? Kids can understand racism, they can understand classism. They can understand the separation of why one community has these beautiful houses close together and why communities like mine have abandoned buildings. It
Mhm.
looks, they can feel it, they can sense it, they know it. And not having those conversations causes more harm than good, which is why it's so important that we engage in these conversations with them and say, okay, well, how do you challenge systemic racism and institutional racism with kids, right? Because at the end of the day, the household income is the number one health disparity, right? That has the greatest impact on health outcomes. So when we
Mhm.
talk about health equity and the disparities our communities are facing, we have to talk about money. We have to center
Mhm.
it around economic justice. So how do we invite our kids in such a deep systemic institutional level, right? Well, it doesn't have to be super complex. It could
Mhm.
be like for a season right now, we're not going to shop at Starbucks because we believe the dollars we have has buying power. We may not have, a lot in comparison to other people, but no matter how much we have buying power and that tells a story. So where I
Mhm.
spend my dollars matters. So
Mhm.
instead, could we shop local? Could we buy small from a BIPOC owned business or a Latina owned business?
Mhm.
Can we together decide where we want to donate in this season or give to in this season? Or is there a family that we can think of that maybe is going through a hard season that we can buy some gifts or bring some food to them, right? That speaks volumes and is communication greater than just saying, this is what you should do with your dollars. It's how we are engaging with the everyday world as we're
Mhm.
living in it, and then asking, how can I make an impact with my dollars in the decisions that I'm making?
Mm. Yes. Oh, yes. All of this is just very thought provoking. And it makes so much sense. You're so right about communication and the way that we present ourselves. It's almost like the way that we parent too, right? That how ultimately we are modeling the way for them. And same thing goes with money as well. And so, considering all of this based on all of our conversation thus far, how do we heal from financial trauma to ensure that the next generation doesn't fall into this repetitive cycle?
The first step is to confront our money story. What are the messages? What are the stories that we grew up with? And allow ourselves to reflect on that so that we can be able to give our self space to write it down. I like to do journaling. That's something that works really well for me. So once I have that core memory or several core memories that come to mind, I wrote them down. I was like, okay, what's the lie that I'm believing out of this core memory, right? So for me, that was scarcity. that I'm never going to have enough money. I'm not going to succeed like my friends and my peers are. And so that was the lie that I believed. Okay, so then what is the actual truth around that? Um, we live there's unlimited opportunities to make money. I can be as successful as my neighbor and my friends can be as well, right? And so the writing down those lies then allow for me to confront it and say, whoa, there are some deep rooted lies here that I believe about myself and what potentially could be for myself that I now want to do the reframing, the internal work of allowing myself the space to believe that there is truth around what could be for me and how I live my life and how I thrive.
Mm,
Does that
yes.
make sense?
Yes. No, it definitely takes a lot of reflection, yeah, to confront it.
There is, yeah, you definitely have to reflect on it, and I think it's something that I would say don't do it alone, right? Do it in community. When I think about when I first started this journey, I saw a group of friends that were all on their own financial journey, and I put a Facebook post out, and I was like, "Hey, friends, like, I'm noticing that y'all are on this financial journey. How about we start a Facebook group so we can have an accountability group together and celebrate our wins together and share our goals together?" That was the most amazing year ever. So many of us became debt free in that season. So many of us bought homes in that season. We accomplished these wins, got to confront our money mindsets because we did it in community. We didn't do it
Mm,
alone. And I think that's so vital and important. So as we're each learning, as we're each confronting, like who can you invite in? Who are some safe, brave people that you can invite in, that you can walk through this together and share some of those deep fears that you have, right? Like I've shared with friends, I struggle with feeling like I'm not going to succeed in life and that I'm meant for a life of struggle. Well, where was the very first time I heard that? Or when was the very first time that I believed that about myself? And let me take the intentional time to uproot that lie because it's not true and be able to now do the cognitive work that I need to do to reframe my mindset so that when I look at money or how much is in my bank account or not in my bank account, I
mm,
can be able to say, you do not determine my worth or my value.
mm.
And this does not determine whether or not I'm successful.
Right. Oh, I love this. I love this. And I don't know if you have any thoughts about this. Like if you are with family or friends that speak negatively about money or that have a scarcity mindset, what are your recommendations?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I was that person who was that negative person talking about money and like a scarcity mindset. What would I say to myself when I was in that season? I think the first thing would have to identify is there relational equity, first of all? Are we actively in relationship with this individual or couple or whoever it is, where we can be able to have that open dialogue? Is it a safe space to offer that feedback? Because if it's not, then it might just be that some boundaries needs to be set in place around how we engage in conversation with that individual. Now, if there is a relational equity, I would say, "Hey, I'm noticing that there's a lot of comments being made around, money or XYZ. Tell me more about that. I'd love to hear
Mm,
what you think about that." I think asking people more questions and being curious with them allows for them to even think through what do they mean by it? Because they may not even be aware that they're doing it, right?
mm,
And
mhm,
so, hey, I'm noticing, I'm seeing this. Tell me more about that. I'd love to hear. Or hey, I'm following some really cool financial content creators that I think could really create some opportunity for you to dream beyond some limitations. That's a little bit more direct, right? So I think it really depends on who is the individual, is there relational equity, and could there be an opportunity to partner alongside them, right? Now, what if they're an individual who's facing financial insecurity? I did a post on this actually. It's again, is there relational equity, right? Because we can be quick to assume and make assumptions that they're doing something wrong while never acknowledging the real systems that are in
mhm,
play, right? The racial wealth gap, the gender gap, pay gap, right? Worker exploitation. Like there are so many things that are contributing factors to financial insecurity and it not just being only the individual. And so often we are quick to blame the individual. So I
Yes.
think it's more about how do we partner alongside our neighbors in our community and say, hey, let's have a conversation on this. Let's have a dialogue around it. And the more we can foster that safety and curiosity, the more it's this invitation of saying, hey, can we walk together through this and let's see how we can grow together and reframe our language around money?
Yes. Yes. Thank you for sharing that. It definitely gives this different viewpoint that maybe some people didn't know. Yeah, because I think we often blame those without really recognizing the systems that are in place that impedes people to move forward for sure. So as far as with talking to your children about money, right? If you ever are in a very difficult financial situation or if you see that your children want to learn a little bit more about either saving or budgeting, how do you really involve them? I don't know if you have any tips to share with mamas out there so that way they grow up in a positive mindset about money. Do you have any tips?
So I think the first step is first identifying where each child's unique beliefs and thoughts around money, right? I have three
Mm,
girls. They all have different patterns of how they spend money and how they view money. And so how I guide and teach each child is different, right? So
mm,
I have one child who she's the one that lost the home with us. And even though she was a toddler, didn't have language for it. She experienced it in her body in a different kind of way, and that's carried with her, right? And so now I'm trying to help her heal too because I'm seeing her with her own struggles, specifically around scarcity. And so I'll say things like, "Hey, I'm noticing you haven't spent any of your money on your debit card because she is a digital artist, so she makes money. She's figured out ways. She sings as well, so she'll get paid to sing with my husband.
mm,
So this girl has a way of making money, but she has such a fear around spending it. So her unique challenge and approach and how I parent her through that then is hey mama, I'm noticing some fear around money. What are some things that bring you joy right now?
mm,
How can we use some of the dollars you have where you can experience joy in your spending so that you don't become so gripped by fear with it?
mm,
Right? Then I have
mhm.
another child who just spends. She doesn't think about it. She's not the best saver. She's my youngest one. She's just like, just anytime she has money, ooh, I want to buy this. I want to buy that. Okay. So with her, I'm more like, okay, what does it look like to be intentional with your dollars? Do you
Mm,
really want that? Do you think that that is going to help you get what you're really looking to get? Right now, if it's rooted out of the things that bring her joy and her values, for example, she wanted to buy a baleta, but she didn't want to just get one for her. She wanted to get one for her and her sister. And she's like, do you think I have enough money for it? Because generosity, that's something that brings her joy. I'm not going to stop her from buying paletas for her and her sister. Right? That is an
mhm,
expression of her using dollars she earned
mm,
to then give to her sister. That's an
mhm,
expression of love. And so I think really it's so unique per child. So I'd say first is start identifying like what are the patterns and the beliefs that you're seeing your kids have, and then create this invitation to teach them and have these conversations around what their unique questions are or expressions are around money. And then when it comes to actually budgeting or saving, you can do there's like role play. You can use like monopoly money. You can,
mm,
there's these different strategies and things that you can do. But I really think if we get the mindset down, then we can focus on here are the tools and strategies like
mm.
budgeting, saving, and investing. But first, I'd say help your children build healthy money mindsets.
Yes. Oh, I love this. Yeah, and it sets them up for success. And that is the ultimate goal. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Oh my gosh, so many great tips.
Can I add one more thing that just came to
Yeah.
mind? I think remaining connected to like our cultural legacy and
Mm,
experiences is so key, right? Because I think of my dad. He's like, Mija, you remind me of my mom. You just have this like way of making money. And I think that's so natural and inherent for a lot of us, right? That we can come up with ideas. Basically, it's entrepreneurship
Yeah.
in a maybe smaller scale, but it's still entrepreneurship and where we can make something or do something and sell it. And so it's, yeah, creating that opportunity to connect with our cultural identities as well, to be able to say, okay, how can I honor my ancestors in a way where I can tap into this experience and be able to identify and create ways of building wealth that benefits my community.
Yes, I love it. I love it. Well, Jasmine, I didn't prepare you for this, but I am going to ask you two questions that I ask my guests, the Viva la Mami questions. And so, what is the meaning of motherhood?
Oh my gosh. I would say the meaning of motherhood for me is living a whole and healed life so I can be the best mom I can possibly be for my kiddos.
Oh, I love that. Thank you for sharing that. All right. Second question. What is one tip of advice you have for Latina mommies?
Yes. Take a deep breath. Breathe.
Mm,
Give yourself permission. It is okay to just inhale and exhale. And then also give yourself permission to dream. We
mm,
are oftentimes so lost in the hustle and bustle of life, of doing all mommy things, that we don't give ourselves permission to say, what am I dreaming up in this season? And what does it look like to allow myself to have the space, whether it's a minute or 2 minutes or 3 minutes, to dream about what could be for myself, my family, and my community?
Oh, I love this. Y'all heard Jasmine. Dream. Yes. That should be
Dream girl.
dream girl. Yes. That should be on a t-shirt, just saying. Yes. Well, Jasmine, where can people follow you?
Yeah, so I am on Instagram. You can follow me at yourfriend.jasmine because I want to be your friend. And then Mentally Mutual is on Instagram as well. And so is the Firehouse Dream.
Yes. All right. Well, I'll make sure to share all of this in the show notes and also some of the resources that you shared because I think if we don't overcome our financial traumas and heal from that, ultimately it's going to be passed down to our kids. And I know that it is a lot of work. It is a lot of work for us first, second gen folks that, we're parenting differently. We're doing things a lot different than our parents. And not to mention the money aspect as well. I know it is a lot of work, but it is our responsibility. And being that we are aware, how can we set them for success, right? How can we change and build generational wealth so that our kids wouldn't be hurting like how we did or how our parents did and so on. So thank you so much for all of the wisdom that you shared. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Love being here and getting to share my story.
Thank you for tuning in to the Viva la Mami podcast. If you like this episode, make sure to leave a review and write what episode really resonated with you. If you really loved it, share it on social media or with an amiga. As always, please subscribe to this podcast wherever you are listening. Make sure to follow me at Viva la Mami on Instagram or visit vivalamami.com. Please note the information shared in this podcast is for educational purposes only and should not be replaced by your healthcare provider nor taken as professional advice.